I chair the Water Quality Committee, and we'll bring it to order. And first item of business will be, of course, the 1-5 mandates that at the beginning of any meeting of the board, the chair shall remind all members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest under the subchapter. The chair will also inquire as to whether there are any known conflicts of interest with respect to any of the matters coming before the board today at this time. I see none, then we will proceed. The approval of the draft meeting minutes of September the 10th. Let's do that one first. I think you will see that IT has jumped in with the minutes. So if there are things that you have seen in the minutes that you think that we need to adjust, just make note and we'll try to do the best we can. But using the IT format might take some of the narrative out, but we do have it on TV or recorded. So if there's any, to the public, if there's anything that you want to see and that was said that might not be in these minutes, please let us know. So is there a motion on the floor after reading what you've got there for September 10? Entertain a motion that we accept those. Commissioner Twitty made a motion that we accept those. Seconded Commissioner Allison. Any discussion? All those approved, say aye. Aye. All those no, same sign. Thank you. Before I start any further, though, let's see if we got a quorum. 1, 2. We do. Everyone. Okay, thank you. Okay, the second draft meeting minutes is for November the 12th. Same thing. If there's any questions you've got on that. Commissioner Twitty?
I don't have a correction. I just got a curiosity question. There were 2 things identified through the minutes last time that were going to have action items, or at least imply there were going to be action items for this meeting. And then I had a third one on the stormwater rules that were going to come for action, but we don't have any action items. Is there any, there's just been delays in those things moving forward? Or I guess maybe there is a question there. Is that recorded accurately in the minutes that those were going to come back as action items?
I did not see that in the minutes that there was going to be an action item on stormwater.
I had in there was going to be a approval of the Jordan Lake model was going to come. Am I misreading that? And approval of the Falls Lake model. And then there was talk about the stormwater rules readoption was going to come. I had that in my minutes or in my notes, but it wasn't in the minutes.
Okay. Well, there are no action items today. That's number one. We do have presentations follow up from those minutes, but let's go into those minutes. Break those up.
You want overall process, what I understand as chair of the commission, that we were presented originally that Jordan would be coming back in January when it came here as information in November. That's not happened. There was also discussion that Falls may be coming back in January, and that's not ready.
Okay.
And the stormwater rules were queued up, but I don't think they got completion before the break in the deadline, so they were pulled back.
Okay.
From the overall, and I'm just citing the overall process. I'm not trying to get into committee business, but that's what I understand at the EMC.
That's sufficient to answer my question.
Is that right?
Mr.
Okay.
Chair. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I was just curious.
Okay, and I was quickly going to, thank you, Chairman Solomon, for bringing that up, but I was quickly going to refer to the comments under the info item on the minutes. And if you would look at the minutes under info number 5, update on Falls Lake, you'll see basically what Commissioner or Chairman Solomon just mentioned is that the last sentence there starting at the last 2 sentences of number 5, that March 26, commissioners emphasized the need for achievable targets, equal time to UNRBA and the DWR presentations, and clarity on the consequences of approving new models. EMC, Chair Solomon noted, the EMC must approve both Jordan and Falls models before rulemaking and urged the committee to prepare for a significant review effort. And that's what we're doing today. as the agenda states, as we will be getting into that. Does that help?
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Twitty. Any other questions or comments on the minutes? If not, I'll look for a motion that we approve.
I'll move it.
Commissioner Twitty, thank you. Motion's made. Is there a second? Second. Commissioner Ellison seconded. Any other comments on that? Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Okay, we get into the first item, the annual feeding operation, general permits, rulemaking, rule adoptions, DWR. Michael, thank you for your presentation today. And there are some questions, and so, be there ready to, if there are any. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Commissioners and Chairman Keen. My name is Michael Pajetra, Deputy Director with the Division of Water Resources, bringing to you an information item on animal feed operations, general permits rulemaking, and the rule readoption process. A little bit of historical background. In 1995, the North Carolina General Assembly established a permitting program for animal feed operations. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. Just in case, the purpose for the program is to ensure that the animal waste associated with animal feed operations is managed correctly so as not to impact surface and groundwater. DWR issues general permits for animal feed operations, and those are issued renewed every 5 years. In April of 2019, we finalized a new set of general permits. We issue a permit and then individual certificates of conformity to each operation. Those would have been valid from 2019 to 2024. That was the last one that we actually issued, and we'll touch on that 2024 date in just a minute. On May 10th of 2019, the Farm Bureau filed petitions with the Office of Administrative Hearings contesting the following 3 conditions in the 2019 general permits. The grounds for the contesting the conditions is that they believe that they were rules that should have gone through the rulemaking process. Those 3 conditions are the phosphorus loss assessment tool, monitoring wells on facilities with waste structures in the 100-year floodplain, and an annual report requirement. There's a meandering history of the legal decisions that were made, but ultimately, October 17th, 2025, just last fall, the North Carolina Supreme Court affirmed a Court of Appeals decision in favor of the Farm Bureau, upholding the decision that the challenged general permit conditions are rules subject to the APA's rulemaking requirements. Wanted to touch on the dates that we mentioned as far as the general permit and the time period for it from 2019 to 2024. There was a session law in 2024 that extended the general permit expiration date from 2024 to 2026. And that was due to the ongoing litigation. And then again, from 25 in session law 2025-97, extended it from 2026 to 2028. So the current certificates of conformity and general permits are valid until September of 2028. Seems like a long time from now, but to go through this entire rulemaking process and then get applications for the new general permits will take, it'll be a tight timeline if we're able to get rules through in July of 2026. The division proposes to draft rules as described to codify general permit conditions into rules. The way that we are proposing to structure it is in our 2T 1300 rules. 1302 are the definitions. Then 1320 to 1327 will be our swine and swine digester general permit conditions. Same thing in 1330 and 1340, that'll be the cattle and cattle digester general permits, and poultry wet waste and poultry wet waste digester general permits. One of the things that we're also proposing that we would like to move forward with is readoption of the entire section 1300 and doing that at a advanced schedule to what has been proposed previously. Previously, I believe the schedule had approval of readoption for the 1300 rules in May of 28. So we would like to pull out all the 1300 rules that deal with animal feed operations, since we're going to be making these changes, and readopt all those rules as we're going through this process of adding the general conditions into the rules. Additionally, section 1400 is the manure hauler operations. And so we're proposing to also pull those out of the rulemaking schedule for rule readoption and do those on this advanced schedule. These are the two sections that the animal feed operations branch works with. And so it would be more efficient for the commission, for hearings, and for staff to just deal with these two rules and go through the entire process once.
Can I ask a question, Chairman?
Jennifer?
Thank you. Just for my own background information, but how many permits, how many swine and swine digester permits do we have? How many cattle permits, et cetera?
Sure. So overall, we have about 2,200 operations. The bulk of those are swine operations. And then the breakdown between digester and normal operations, we have that data. I don't have it in front of me, but we could provide that. But looking about 2,200.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Twitty, please.
Just clarification, that's permits. Permitted facilities, 2,200 permitted facilities.
Yes, sir. Okay. So the proposed action, next steps is proceed with drafting rules and anticipate having draft rules back to the committee by July of 2026. Again, our timeline is to have these rules go through the rulemaking process, get them approved. The applications for the general permits are required to come in 180 days prior to the current general permits expiring. They expire end of September of 2028. So the applications have to be in February, March of 2028. And so we have to have everything set up prior to then. It's a tight time frame, but this is our proposal.
Ellison?
Could you go back one slide, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so these are two large bodies of rule. I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, that the hauler operations, redoing that rule will be a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient for you to draft that because it's less complicated than the operations?
Yes, sir. Yeah, they'll be pretty similar to what we have currently. There might be a couple of tweaks on the 1400 rules. Grouping them together is simply because they're all dealing with one program, be more efficient for staff and for EMC to deal with both sets of rules going through the process.
I guess what I'm getting at is there are diverse constituencies with interests in these rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if we could expedite the process by just taking one at a time, just starting with the 1300, for example, as fast as you can, or the 1400 first.
Mm-hmm.
If that would expedite our process a little bit.
We're suggesting adding the 1400 rules to this process as opposed to allowing the 1400 rules to go through the normal rule readoption process, which would occur several months after this process.
Right. But what I understood from your schedule is you're going to come to us with draft rules for 1300 and 1400 in July.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you could bring one at the May meeting and then the other, if that's possible, if you can
Yes,
break these into pieces.
We will absolutely. Thank you for that suggestion. We'll look into if that's feasible to do. Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Well, a follow-up on that, will OSBM, the RA and the fiscal notes all pertain to one piece or all of it? Is that what we're going to see in July?
Yeah, it would.
In reference to what he just said, if you do piece it out,
Mhm.
how are they going to handle it?
Yes, sir. We would propose doing it one fiscal note for all of it. So we would have to evaluate if we were to split those apart, how that would affect it.
Have you mentioned this to OSBM?
No,
in
sir.
reference to an RIA?
We wanted
4?
to, no, sir, we wanted to bring to you this concept, this proposal prior to bringing the draft rules to you that, as we normally would.
Sure.
So,
Okay, just following up on Commissioner Ellison's.
Yes, sir.
part About piecing it.
Chairman,
Commissioner Reardon.
one question that I have is obviously the Supreme Court ruled because of the three issues that were included in the previous permit and actually indicated that those items required rulemaking. What's the department's position of how you're going to address those three items going forward? Do you plan to include that in the new rulemaking process, or has the department decided not to move forward with these three issues?
yes, sir, we're moving forward. And our effort is to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling. And that ruling was that these conditions would need to go through rulemaking. So that's what we're proposing to bring forward to the EMC.
Can follow up?
Yes, sir.
So is it the position of the department that they believe is it the position of the department that the Supreme Court ordered the department to include these three items in rulemaking? Is that, or that if you chose to go forward with these three items, it had to be in rulemaking? What's the position of the department there?
Yes, sir. My understanding is that the Supreme Court stated that they needed to go through rulemaking, and the department believes that these are appropriate conditions, and so we're bringing them to the MC for rulemaking.
So council, follow up?
Follow up. Yes,
So
sir.
council, just so that we all understand, is it the department saying here, we're bringing these three items forward in rulemaking because of the direction of the court case with the Supreme Court? Or is the department saying, we want to move forward with these three items, so we're going to include them in rulemaking? I think there's two different things here.
Yeah.
I
and-
can't
and I-
speak on
for-
behalf of the
For
department,
clarity,
but
for
it's the two.
clarity, I'll recognize, counsel.
Sorry. I would not want to speak on behalf of the department, but I'm pretty sure they're saying number two, that if the department wants these conditions to be part of the general permit, then they must go through rulemaking before they can be included in the general permit.
So to follow up.
Commissioner
So
Reardon.
it's clear here by the department going forward with these three issues, they're not doing it because it's the belief of the direction of the Supreme Court. You're doing this of your own volition. Is that correct?
Commissioner Ellison and then Chairman Solomon.
No, I'm just, he pretty much covered.
Got you. Chairman Solomon.
So this reminds me a little bit about the triennial review on the fiscal notes. And then we can put one piece of bad stuff in there and it's overshadowed by all the good stuff of the other stuff.
Right.
And I'd just like to say that I think the RIA or the the fiscal note needs to reflect these three specific conditions and let them stand on their own. Because that's been the subject of the Supreme Court case. And they said it had to go to rulemaking. I think probably all parties should see those three provisions in their own RIA so we can evaluate environmental impacts, economic benefits, and economic cost. And that not be covered under a bunch of other rules that could screen out or offset the expenses or the positives or the negatives of a rule. So I just add that into the mix for the committee to think about the RA. And as Commissioner Ellison, Vice Chair Ellison said, how do we sequence these? But I think if there's going to be contention over the rules, the three rules, as Commissioner Reardon may have said, we need to be able to look at the three rules that are now being introduced into rulemaking on their own basis.
Yes,
if I will.
and to follow up with that comment is the Reigns Act and following up with the economic and the fiscal note, and the cost of all together of what that
No, I'm saying the
implications
opposite.
would
I'm
be.
saying those three should stand on their own because they're the
Well, I
ones.
agree.
the
Well,
source.
yes, sir, I understand. Commissioner Ellison.
Does the department anticipate recommending any other changes to 1300 or 1400?
There may be some housekeeping items that we would recommend changing. We did go through a stakeholder process previously and got some commentary on changes to the general permits that we had incorporated. Those would then be incorporated into the rules as well.
Next slide.
I believe that's it, sir.
These good questions. wanted to bring this on the agenda today for discussion, for the committee to get their eyes on it, and for stakeholders to start seeing the proposed action from the department into the committee, and then from the committee, when in that time period being. I will say that to say this, just because we see it as an information item today doesn't mean we're going to pull the trigger on it the next meeting. I'm sort of one of those that wants to get it out early, so everybody's at the table early, and the process will take a period of time to get all the players at the table and involve all the stakeholders. Commissioner Ellison?
Just to clarify for myself, you're originally suggesting changes to 1300 and 1400 and a single RIA to cover the changes for those two sections with the 3 changes required by the court in each of those sections.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Chair Solomon, I guess my question is, should we have separate RIAs, one for 1300 and one for 1400?
That would be up to the committee to decide on what. My instinct is, and I'm just talking one person's instinct here when it comes to the big commission, is we need to be able to see those 3 changes. They're going to be the contentious ones. They went all the way to the Supreme Court. We need to be able to see the costs and benefits and impacts of those 3 changes stand on their own so they can be duly considered either way. And I'm assuming there's some contention still there about those 3 rules. I may be wrong. We may all agree that they need to be just slapped in the rules and be done, but I don't know what the stakeholders feel. So I'm just a little
Understood.
cautious.
And I guess my question is there a benefit to having 2 separate RIAs, one for the changes to 1300 and one for the changes to 1400?
If they're on the same schedule, they probably need the same RRA. That would maybe be the short answer that I think council will tell us. But I'm not so sure they need to be on the same schedule for the rules review and readoption, or considering these 3 that are responding to a court case. So we can always go out to RRC and ask them, and these certainly are extenuating circumstances.
Yes.
That we don't often see with our rules review and readoption or our general rulemaking. So
Good discussion. Yes. Council?
Just briefly, generally speaking, when you bring a rule package, changes to a rule package to the RRC, you're going to have one RIA for that entire rule package. One suggestion, I guess, to address the concern of these 3 particular conditions being added would be to have a separate section within a single RIA addressing those 3 conditions and pull out the impacts related to those 3 conditions. But I think for your purposes, for the department's purposes, for OSBM's purposes, having 2 separate RIAs or 3 separate RIAs, one for 1300, one for 1400, one related to these conditions, probably not the most efficient way to go about it. But if pulling out those conditions would be helpful to the commission, I think that's certainly something that could be accomplished.
Well, I think it would be helpful to the committee as we discuss it through committee moving forward, is the OSBM approved RIAs are before us before we really get into the meat of this. That's my question was what does OSBM see into this discussion from the department? Because if the department is bringing it before us at this time, surely you've had some conversation. So with this coming up at committee today and the question coming out about OSBM and RIAs, then what is specifics that they're going to be looking for? So we don't steer off course. And if we're going to include 3, or are we going to take 3 away? Where do we hold in with OSBM? I guess that was initiated the discussion. But following up on Commissioner Reardon, the Supreme Court versus what the department wants. If it's what the department wants, then I think we all need to be on the same page moving out of the gate.
I think
Commissioner
one,
Baumgartner.
yeah, thanks, sir. In the past, what has hung us up on triennial reviews and like one specific issue was a triennial review needed to be done quickly, or it was already on time. If the department's recommending that you aren't going to bring the trial review until 2028, sectioning out those 3 issues, is that what you said?
Yeah, the current general permits expire in 2028. If we consider the rulemaking process and the timeline associated with that, and then the development of the general permit that's required to go to a notice, and then the applications that are required to be submitted at least 180 days prior to expiration, July 2026 to September of 2028 becomes a very short timeline.
Okay. I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood. I thought you meant that you're bringing the rule. You initially would have to bring the rule for our review in 2028, but you were moving it up because of
Yeah,
these
for
three things.
readoption,
Yes.
apologize. For rule readoption, the 1,300 rules are scheduled, the EMC schedule is to have those readopted, I believe, by May of 2028. We're recommending, proposing to take 1,300 and 1,400 out of that schedule and advance it by about 10 months.
So what I'm saying, if the department want to play its odds and put everything in there and bring 1,300 and 1,400 for our review, but then key into those three issues, you aren't going to bring them before 2028 begin with. So there is some period of time there that you for reauthorization. Is that correct?
We were proposing for this to be the readoption.
Understood.
Making the edits to the rule and considering this as the readoption, so we don't have to, for efficiency. Sir.
The committee considering these three items is not going to push you back as far as when you actually needed that rule readoption, because you originally were looking at 2028 for that to happen. You're moving that time frame up.
Yes, sir.
So there is some time there for the committee to consider these three items, is what I'm
Yes, sir.
saying.
Yes,
So
sir.
in the past, we've had triennial reviews and those one issue come up and we're continually trying to get through that process. So I'm saying, if it comes in one packet or all together as 1,300, 1,400, or you separate the three, timing wise, I don't think it matters. It's going to be issued to the department. I guess what I'm saying, I don't see a problem with combining everything because of your original timing versus as long as we key into those three issues, because there are going to be some discussions.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ellison?
It appears reasonable to assume that the financial impacts will require this to go to the legislature because of the RAINS Act.
Unsure at this time. That's something that we will get into and do an analysis on.
Has the department made any sort of assessment of how long that legislative review might take?
No, sir.
I'm just wondering, depending on how the final package gets out, and the legislative calendar and all the rest of it, what that might do to your anticipated schedule.
Yeah. Thank you for that, sir. We will take a look at that.
Any other comments? Questions on the presentation? If not, we'll move on. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you very much.
Next presentation on the agenda will be actually 2 and 3 are all going to be coupled in a way that's going to inform the committee on modeling. I went over this with Director Rogers to assimilate the modeling process along with Chairman Solomon for the committee to understand the modeling piece for not just High Rock or Jordan or Upper Neuse. We wanted to get it all together and understand this modeling piece on how we're moving forward. So it's in depth, and it may be boring to some people, but it won't be to me because I really need to learn more on modeling. There's so many people involved. There's so much money and resources that have been put into all three of these areas. I want to understand it more. And because we are doing it today does not mean we're going to pull the trigger in March. We may or we may not. We don't know that yet. As a committee, we're going to listen today, learn and look at this and move forward. And it's up to the committee, however, moving forward. But today, for information, I hope this will enlighten everyone here at the committee on these three items, on these next two presentations. Commissioner Ellison.
Just to clarify, so intend this to have a more technical focused rather than yet another history lesson?
Yes, I hope it's not a history lesson. I need to go to the science class.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, well,
Pam.
thank you. I am Pam Beam. I am supervisor of the Division of Water Resources Modeling and Assessment Branch. I've been with the branch since 2005, and the last model that I brought to the commission for approval was Falls Lake in 2009. Mr. Westall was on the commission at the time. I'm sure he remembers the pain of going through that process. Anyway, I'm going to give you a brief presentation on the Jordan Lake Calibrated Nutrient Response Model. I'll just touch on the statutory requirements that are kind of bringing the EMC into the process by defining what is a calibrated nutrient response model. And then we're going to spend most of our time looking at the model itself and then the summary. So these are the relevant statutes and session laws that require the EMC to approve the calibrated nutrient response model. Specifically, the general statute is the main driver there. I'm not going to get into the history in detail. Ellie, I think, did a great job of that in November. But the original rules for Jordan Lake were based on a calibrated nutrient response model. It was developed for the division by Tetra Tech in the early 2000s. The original model was approved by the EMC in 2002. Okay. The general statute 143-215.1 C5 lays out the specific components of EMC approval for a model, including that it be developed and maintained with current data and is capable of predicting the impact of nitrogen or phosphorus in the surface waters. All right, so let's start with this definition of a calibrated nutrient response model. It starts with a water quality model. It's just a mathematical representation of pollutant fate, degradation, and transport. What makes it a nutrient response model is that it can predict the response of the receiving water to pollutant loading. So in this case, the receiving water is Jordan Lake, and the pollutants are nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. What makes it calibrated is that it has undergone the adjustment of parameter values, kinetic rates, to reduce the response, to reproduce the response seen in reality. In other words, you have calibrated the model so that it is actually representative of the current conditions within that water body. Is a overly simplified figure of modeling. But the purpose of doing this is to determine the necessary reductions of both nitrogen and phosphorus that will allow the lake to meet water quality standards for chlorophyll. And we're focusing on chlorophyll because that is the target variable where we have a standard in place. So as you can see in this very general diagram, the purple arrow represents the total existing loading of nutrients coming into Jordan Lake from all sources. So that's not only tributaries, it's benthic loading, it's atmospheric deposition, everything, all the sources coming into the lake. The result of existing loading is a lake that is violating the water quality standard for chlorophyll, and that's represented by the green lake. So once the model is developed, there's then a process of running the model, maybe even hundreds of times, and systematically reducing loading coming into the lake and seeing how the lake responds. So the goal is to find that combination, nitrogen and phosphorus reductions, that are going to result in meeting standards, represented by now a blue lake in the diagram.
Can I ask a question, Chairman?
Yes.
So do you not consider dissolved oxygen?
Yes,
Okay, but you don't have it in your,
this is, it'll pop up later.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the model selected to evaluate nutrient response in Jordan Lake is called the Environmental Fluid Dynamic Code. It's otherwise known as EFDC. It is nationally known and it has been applied to several water bodies in North Carolina, including Falls Lake and the Lower Cape Fear. The model was developed by Dr. Bowen from UNC Charlotte. The initial model development was funded through the NC Collaboratory Project in 2019 to 2020, and then was further refined by Dr. Bowen under DWR contract. And that was because there simply wasn't enough time under the collaboratory project. It was a very defined deadline to get a model fully functioning and calibrated. And so there was some discomfort from DWR's side in our review of the model. We wanted more confidence in the model and that we felt comfortable using it, recommending it for regulatory decision-making. So that was why we extended the effort and provided funds to Dr. Bowen. Okay. EFDC is a mechanistic model, which means it is a mathematical representation of physical and biological processes using equations. I don't know if anyone remembers differential equations from college days, but they come into play pretty heavily here, and different algorithms to describe a system's components, interactions, and dynamics. The 2024 Jordan Lake EFDC model has two main components. First is the physical model, where the lake hydrodynamics are simulated. And also there is the eutrophication or nutrients model, where the water quality components are simulated. The physical model simulates water volume, surface elevation, water level, water flow, temperature, and the eutrophication model simulates water quality parameters. So really with this slide, I just wanted to capture the main components represented in the eutrophication model. So as you can see, we're simulating organic carbon, the nitrogen and phosphorus series, dissolved oxygen, total suspended solids, and two separate algae groups. It's not normally that I get so far in a presentation and then just now showing the map, but here it is. This map is showing the Jordan Lake watershed. It's an interesting watershed because the lake has two arms, the Haw and the New Hope, and the Haw has most of the watershed, but the New Hope has most of the lake volume. So and there are impairments, chlorophyll A impairments on both sides of the lake. The dam is, let's see if this will work. Yay. The dam is all the way down here at the bottom. Just to point that out to you. All right, now we're getting more into the model setup for Jordan Lake. The map on the right is showing the relative changes in depth in Jordan Lake, where the blue color indicates the deeper parts of the lake and the yellows, reds indicate the more shallow areas. And what you see is a bunch of little boxes, and that is how the model is seeing the lake. The model was split into 407 horizontal cells. This is done to be able to represent the differences in water quality and to allow for proper water movement when you run the model. So in each of these cells is an entirely functioning model. And then at every time step, the model reruns, and then things are moved up, down, left, right, down, however the model results are for that particular time step. It can get pretty computationally extensive, especially because each cell is then split into up to 25 vertical layers, depending on the depth. And so this is done to evaluate the differences in vertical water quality parameters. So like, for example, you don't expect dissolved oxygen to be the same on the bottom as it is at the top, and same with temperature. So you have the ability with this model to look at those differences vertically. The model was set up to represent January 14 to February 2016 data because there was good coverage in chlorophyll A data during that time frame. I recall that this project started in 2019, and so that was sort of the most recent data set at the time that was available to Dr. Bowen. Okay, so the model was calibrated where there was water quality data available, as indicated by the yellow pins on the map. For each pin, model predictions were compared to observed data. And so the process of calibration is iterative, where first you are calibrating for the physical variables, water level and temperature. Once you get that down, then you move on to the water quality variables, including nutrients, dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll A. The water quality part is much more complicated to calibrate because you typically have less data for these variables than you do for the physical. And there are also a lot more kinetic rates involved, and part of calibration is systematically adjusting those rates, running the model, comparing those rates to literature values, and comparing to the data. Honestly, this could go on forever. There's a famous quote that all models are wrong and some are useful. And so no model is ever going to predict water quality variables perfectly. So it's really important that you understand what your objectives are for model performance when you set out to undergo some project like this. The primary calibration objective of this project was to ensure that the distribution of chlorophyll A predicted by the model matched that of observed data for the model time period. I'm sure I don't have to say much about this slide. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm only showing the chlorophyll A calibration in this presentation just in the interest of time. It's important that the distribution, as I've said, the distribution of model predicted chlorophyll A concentrations closely match that of the observed values. Said another way, it is more important that the model accurately predicts the magnitude and frequency of those higher chlorophyll A values than it accurately predicts exactly where and when those values happen. Yep.
So how do you factor in seasonal variation, time of day, temperature, the impacts of those different parameters?
Yeah, that's also part of the calibration process and evaluating the output and when you expect to see blooms versus not. And it's part of the model calibration process.
So where I'm going with this is looking at your actual monitoring information. And if you have sufficient observed data from different points of time that you can then use to inform your model.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So the bottom left-hand cumulative distribution graph, that's the one that is most important here, which indicates that there is close agreement between the observed and predicted data at the 90th percentile. Also, the predicted and observed cumulative distribution lines follow very similar shapes, indicating that the model captures the overall distribution of chlorophyll A reasonably well. The model shows excellent agreement with observed data at those higher concentrations, particularly around the 90th percentile, with both of those coming in at about, I think it's about 77 micrograms per liter chlorophyll A for both observed and modeled. There are quantitative calibration measures such as mean error, root mean square error, and coefficient of determination that can be used to evaluate model performance statistics. But these can be misleading when you're looking at water quality variables, and we typically don't focus on the statistics because of the fact that you're not trying to match it. You're trying to get the distribution right, and you're not comparing necessarily that one-to-one. It's much more important, the statistics, when you're doing the hydrologic calibration. When you're doing water level and temperature, those statistics really come into play. And so the bottom line was that this level of calibration performance is achieved. It's pretty typical of models of algal growth and highly dynamic long residence time systems. There were extensive improvements in the end to the original 2002 Tetra Tech model. There was better water quality data, more frequent water quality data, Obviously, it was a more recent time span of data that was used. And there was better bathymetry information and a much higher resolution computational model grid. Computers have come a long way. This would have taken days to run back in the day. Now it takes about 2 hours on a simple laptop. So it's pretty amazing. Okay, back to this slide. So at this stage, we're at the point where the model is predicting the lake response to existing loading. That's that top diagram. Now is the process of using the model to determine the nitrogen and phosphorus reductions needed in order for the lake to meet the chlorophyll standard, so that we end up with that blue lake. So this is another systematic process of reducing loading, coming into the lake, running the model, and seeing how the lake responds. To determine the reductions needed, the lake was split into 3 regions. The Morgan and Upper New Hope, that the sort of red area here at the top. The Middle New Hope, which is the green circles, and then the Haw River Arm, which are the blue circles. The split was done due to the differences in loading coming from the subwatersheds. Observed data indicate higher chlorophyll concentrations in the Morgan and New Hope region than for the Haw. Residence times are different and sources of loading are different. So you can expect that there would be different responses to load reductions in the Morgan and Upper New Hope as compared to the Haw. Also, implementation measures taken in the Haw arm to reduce loading would have little to no impact on the Morgan and New Hope region. So you have to look at them separately. We want to be able to provide the most information to help with strategy development, and that's something that we can help use the model for.
Ellison?
You said that the hydrology is dominated by the New Hope arm, correct?
The lake volume, yeah.
Yes. Relatively, approximate percentage, how much is New Hope versus Haw?
Oh, I don't know, Rich, do you know? 90. It's a lot.
80 to 90% of the flow.
Yeah.
80 to 90% of the flow is from the Haw. Okay, thank you.
All right, let me take a minute to describe what we're seeing here. As I mentioned earlier, once the model is calibrated, many nutrient reduction scenarios will run to generate this table, which shows the estimated chlorophyll A exceedance rate that is predicted given a set of nutrient reductions. An exceedance rate means how often the chlorophyll A value is above the standard of 40 micrograms per liter. We allow for 10% or 0.10 exceedance rate when evaluating model output, primarily to account for model uncertainty. So for example, as you can see on here, a 40% reduction in phosphorus, that's going down the left-hand column, and 20% reduction in nitrogen along the top results in 0.08 or an 8% exceedance rate. And note, there are many sets of reductions that could lead to meeting the standard. Basically, anywhere on this slide that you see 0.10 or less is good. This table is for the Haw River arm, and it was shown to be more sensitive to phosphorus reductions than the Upper New Hope and Morgan. And again, so we looked at the 3 regions. So now we're moving down to the, or moving over and up to the Morgan and Upper New Hope stations.
More shallow, correct? We're going from deeper to shallow?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And as you can see here, the reductions needed are higher in this area than for the Haw River arm. This was expected because we are seeing those higher chlorophyll A values in that area. And then finally, this is for the middle of the lake. I mean, the take-home message is that the model is estimating that there are significant reductions needed to meet the chlorophyll A standard, but they differ depending on where you're at in the lake. So at this point, The model's done its job. It has produced the range of reductions needed to meet the chlorophyll standard. And as I've said, any of these combinations where the exceedance rate is 0.10 or less is an option. Model doesn't really care which one you choose.
Jennifer, yes.
So do you have an understanding or a sense of the difference in loadings between phosphorus and nitrogen? Which is the bigger actor?
Well, it depends. I'm gonna get to that, actually. It
okay,
depends
all
where
right.
you are.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so once the tables are done, model's done, we turn the model and these tables over to the stakeholders and nutrient management strategy development team. This is when I give it to Rich and good luck. The stakeholders provide input on the specific reduction target they would prefer, and the strategy is developed from there. So for summary, the model went through an extensive calibration process. It is capable of predicting the reductions needed in nutrient loading to meet the standard. There are spatial differences. The lake is more sensitive to phosphorus reductions versus nitrogen in the Haw River arm, but in the upper New Hope, the opposite is true, and nitrogen is more important in that area. We were so fortunate, I was so fortunate that during this process, we had a staff member in the branch with her doctorate and expertise in EFDC modeling. She provided expert level review and managed the project with Dr. Bowen. We also provided the opportunity for stakeholders to review the model and report for more than 5 months in 2024. And normally we give about 2 months. So this was an extensive time that we provided for stakeholders to review the model and report. And when that was told to them, they were kind of given the caveat that, hey, we're going to be using this to inform the Jordan nutrient rules and reduction goals. This is why we're asking for your review. However, no comments were received during that time. And I should mention Dr. Bowen has officially retired and probably will not answer my phone calls at this point. But he was officially retired at the conclusion of this project. He held on for us to get through it. And so, yeah. Thank you, and take questions.
Pam, that was a great presentation, a good summation of this particular model. I really appreciate what you've put together. I've learned some things already. Thank you. Any comments from committee members? Yes.
Committee members have none. I can chime in as.
Chairman Solomon?
Pam, you were here when this happened, but looking back at the old minutes of the EMC, when these models were first approved, it appears, or I firmly believe, that the EMC sent the request out for comments on the models and got those back. And I guess we started this with all what's required, but the EMC discussed that before the model went to public comment and then took those comments back. This time, it looks like staff put those out a year or so, 2 years before we did, considered it for rulemaking. So I'm just asking, do you know, or can you find out whether that was part of the legal requirements back then to the EMC to be involved with the comments from the public? And I guess that begs a question of would we want to do so now, because even though the department sent it out a year and a half or 2 years, whatever they sent it out last year, whenever, the reality of the rules are now setting in on people as we get closer to do our business. So it's some research that I'd like to see kind of come up to what the history was there, whether it was required or whether the EMC was just more actively involved in setting these models for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if we have to approve, I think we need to think about that a little bit.
Well, there's Commissioner Ellis. Along those lines, you sent it out for comment to the regulated parties like the municipalities. Did you send it out for any peer review?
That is typically what happens is that the stakeholders will hire a consultant with experience in these types of models, and that they will do what we call a third-party review and provide comments for the stakeholders through that.
But you
review
did not
period.
get any third-party review on the technical aspects of the model. And there aren't 8 people in the county that could really do a good job analyzing this model.
Yeah, that's a, and normally they realize that and immediately have consulting firms on hire. That
Including
was,
consulting firms in that rather blanket statement.
Yeah.
This is highly specialized, and I'm just wondering if the department sent it to any outside experts.
no, we typically don't. It's usually the stakeholders are very active and normally that's what happened with Falls and High Rock and the new watershed.
Going to call on Chairman Solomon to follow up. But before I get that, I want to make sure the council wants to respond to his first comment that he made in reference to out for public, where that was. So do you have any response on his comment now, or do you want to hold that out and study that? Because I want to follow up on his comment. Because we have 2 other model presentations, and that was the purpose for coupling all 3 of these today, was to get this information out. So with questions like that, make sure if it is legal or counsel, that we have that direction to march forward, that we don't get into any sticky situations as we move forward with this. You wanted to follow up, Chairman Solomon?
Different matter, 2 questions that I'd like to
Okay.
get Pam to answer, because she's
Okay.
probably forgot, so.
Okay.
You and I dealt with a lot of this stuff 8 or 10 years ago, probably, but, you know, I'm an old
follow me
groundwater
on
guy,
that.
so I did MT3D and ModFlow were my 2 finite difference agreements. I came into surface water modeling much later with the EFDC and all that. I guess the question for me is make sure I understand this is a finite difference model that they're doing, and it is fate and transport,
Yes.
not just advection dispersion, it's fate and transport.
Yes.
Okay, so that's important to me. Fate and transport depends a lot on the biochemistry, right? How things behave. And I know, so I guess the question is, it goes a little bit back to the initial question about anaerobic and aerobic, or what's the oxygen levels and how they affect the biochemistry. Having run these types of models before, you get into, do I pull a book value? Do I pull a experience value? Do I factor those values? So I just like to understand a little bit more about how the biochemistry aspects are being looked at, whether it's anaerobic, aerobic, or without, it's probably going to always be aerobic, but it may be depleted oxygen versus full oxygen. And who makes those decisions? Usually that's a black box modeling decision makes, but I just want some comment there. I also related to that, kind of B of that is, I know my MT3D models were like sticky models. They were really confined because they're groundwater. Things don't move very fast, right? Surface water, that assumption in EFDC, I believe, is that things move pretty fast. So
Yeah.
how do you slow that down? I just like that question answered of how they slow that down to make it look like a lake versus a river. Because that biochemistry will behave differently, whether it's
Yeah.
moving fast or moving slow.
It really comes down to the grid setup. And you have to understand how the water moves. And so that when you run those time steps, that the water is moving appropriately during those time steps. And so that depends on the size of the grid and the number of cells that you have.
Right.
Talk more this way.
But that is the first question on the fate and transport and the biochemistry, and was the same type thought processes. Now that we've done this in 2010 timeframe, and now we're back in 2025, you've got Jordan, High Rock, Falls, Jordan and High Rock particularly, is the same logic with the model grids, the biochemistry assumptions, all that. And I know it's been validated in the field, but I'm just wanting to know, relatively speaking, are we using, what have we learned in the modeling, and have we changed some of those parameters to fit that?
Yeah.
Then the second question I always ask on risk and uncertainty is, within the model, are they factoring for uncertainty on the parameters in the model, which is not usually the way you want to do it. You want to factor the uncertainty on the outputs. And you and I've talked about that before. So the assumptions are usually on uncertainty are not in the model. They're
Right.
outside the model. So
Right.
just a clarification on that for you, if I could.
Yeah.
And you can give it to me later. I'm not throttling you now, but
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, you're right. It is on the outside. rather than
On the inside,
building it in on the
because
inside.
you'll compound them if you do it on the inside.
Right.
I'll give you time to make note, Pam. I'll give you time to make note. We got another question.
It's recording, right?
Okay. Commissioner Ellis.
So you did the initial calibration with 2016 to 2018 data? Is that what you said?
I think 14 to 16.
14 to 16?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there have been changes in the watershed since then. And have you updated your loadings?
No, the model is at this point, and we just got this done 2024. So there has not been funds or time. And I don't know that the watershed has changed that much that you would see this kind of holistic difference in the lake itself. the
Okay,
local
how
spots.
well does the model calibrated with 2014 to 16 data, how well does it predict concentrations measured in 2025 or 2024?
Well, it doesn't. You'd have to go through the process of updating it to be able to do that. Because
Okay.
you'd want the 2025 information, the watershed data, the flows coming in. You would need that type of information and basically reset the entire model.
Couldn't you use the current calibrated model, calibrated with 2014 to 2016, to predict concentrations now or in 2025 and then compare that to measured values?
What I would recommend in that situation is to look at the type of weather that you had during that time period, and was that the similar type of weather in 24 or 25? Because that's really, in the end, rain drives it all, the weather. So if you have similar weather patterns, you're probably going to see similar response within the lake.
And I'd throw temperature in there too.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, you follow up? Yeah.
I just said I would throw temperature in there too, so rainfall and temperature.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ellis.
Where did you get your hydrologic inputs?
That would have been from USGS gauges.
Okay. So do you have any highlights of the differences between the Tetra Tech model and this one?
Where was that? Yeah, it's just come a long way since 2002. The models are able to do more. We're able to do more on the output side of things and processing output. But for the most part, what was better is better data, more frequent data, and then especially with the bathymetry. And then the more higher resolution grid, I think there were 13 cells, there were a lot less cells in the original model.
Okay, but you showed the graph of predicted versus measured values and you're in the 90. So how good was, if you were to throw the Tetra Tech curve up there,
Oh,
is the scale wrong?
I have to go and look. I didn't look at that, but yeah, that's an interesting question. I'll take a look at that.
So the end use, this is to allocate to the municipalities, the requirements that they have to do. So, okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Twitty.
I'm not sure if this is within your expertise or not, but it's a curiosity question. Do you know how the temperature of the lake has changed over the, say, last couple of decades?
I have not looked at the trend lines for that recently.
Am I correct to think a warmer lake has more algae and therefore probably more problems with chlorophyll A than a cooler?
We're definitely seeing longer time periods where you do see those higher chlorophyll A values.
Okay.
And outside of the typical growing season.
All right.
But to follow up with that question, is that temperature ranges in relation to the depth of the water?
Yeah.
You know, it's just hotter on top than it is in the bottom, it's cold. So you certainly have that to consider. That's why I was asking the depth earlier, which part are you drawing from? So when you go to temp, it's got to be in one of those areas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Can you follow up, Commissioner Twitty?
It's what I meant to lead off with. That was an excellent presentation, by the way.
Yes. Any other questions for Pam? Commissioner Ellison, follow up?
And the impetus for this exercise was legislation, or was it something from EPA or?
It was the NC Collaboratory Project, which included language requiring a nutrient response model be developed for Jordan Lake.
From the statute?
From, I think it was a session law.
Session law.
Yeah.
Session law,
Okay,
2016.
and,
16.
Yeah.
but that came after the Tetra Tech. What, at the very beginning, was this all started by session law, or was it started by EPA requirements? Or how did we get this at the very beginning?
I would say both, but I'm gonna let Karen.
So the Jordan Lake was on the impaired list, and so part of developing a management strategy or a TMDL is to do this type of modeling. There's also a statute that requires a calibrated response model, nutrient response model, to be developed for nutrient sensitive waters like this.
It started on the 303D list, and that was at the very beginning. That's how this got started.
Right, and the requirement for the calibrated nutrient response model is tied with that statute.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments from the committee members? If not, Pam, again, thank you.
No
Look forward
problem.
to seeing you again soon.
I think so.
Good job.
Thank you.
We have probably maximum 25 to 30 minutes presentation from two people. And with the questions that will follow, then I'm reluctant to take a 5-minute break, but I would, the nature break, but if, let's go forward. Let's move forward.
Keep you
Saw a
short.
couple of commissioners jump up, so,
Probably shorter than you wanted to be.
okay, we'll move forward really quickly then. And let me introduce, Forrest Westall, who will make the first presentation, followed by, the department, John Heisman. These are updates on the Falls Lake. As you know, as I read earlier, we have significant review to do through the models. We've set the stage. Now let's follow up with what we've been hearing for the last really 6 to 8 months, more specifically last month in November in reference to the minutes. So let's move today with a short version of sort of circling and get it down tight so we can really move forward. I've talked with both presentations, our presenters, and the unified effort, the collaborative effort, I applaud. Thank you. Forrest,
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I will make a note that when I saw the animal waste general permits, I was the first hearing officer for the animal waste permits in
Bless
North
your
Carolina
heart.
30 years ago. So it's coming back around again. So I appreciate the continued work on that. You will not find my presentation to be as technical as Pam's presentation. What I would say to you is everything that Pam said about EFDC is a model. Ditto. That's what the model does. She did a great job describing how the model works and how it functions. As I had explained to the chair prior to making this presentation, I did not plan to go into great detail on the modeling. The reason is because of things that I can note to you today about why approval of the model at this point probably isn't appropriate. The UNRBA model. We have an approved nutrient response model for Falls Lake, as Pam alluded to. That was approved in 2008. That was the basis of the rules that are currently in place. So today I'm going to talk to you about how that process fits in, how our modeling fits into the drafting of the rules. I do think, and I would suggest to the committee, that if we're going to look in detail at the modeling, I would recommend a work session on that. It's not something that's easy to go through in 15 or 20 minutes. And I've provided you that document that I sent to you, which is a full description of how we developed our models, a full description of the models themselves, with references, with calibration curves. We have hundreds of pages of calibration curves between the data collected and what the model came out. That information is available in that document, Commissioner, that I sent to you and sent to JD to look at. So I would recommend that to you, and we can discuss that. So after the meeting on November the 12th, we, put our heads back together. We've been working conjunctively with the division and the department, and appreciate the department. I appreciate the division. Richard has put together a group that we've been meeting on. The chair's been coming to those meetings. And so following the discussions on November the 12th, we had additional follow-up meetings, and we talked about the issue of approving the model. We have a legal team, and we've looked into that, and we know what the process is. Pam referenced the statute and referenced the requirement for an adopted model. In discussing it with staff, and I'll mention this, but the complexity here has to do with the requirements. You develop a model to set the regulatory requirements. How much reduction in nutrients do you need to meet the standard? And the existing model requires reduction levels that are not achievable. The existing model does that. The models that we developed two models on the lake. EFDC was one of them. And we developed two models. And the model that we developed shows that from about 2018, which we did the same period, Commissioner Ellison, 2014 to 18. This is a problem with modeling. It's always delayed because you have the data that you did before. And so we, based on our modeling, the reductions required for the lake are significantly higher than those reductions that were projected with the original model. So we've got some reality issues here, some real difficult issues to deal with. So the framework that was put in place in 2011, two sets of reductions, stage 1, stage 2. The stage 2 requirements 40% reduction in nitrogen, 77% reduction in phosphorus from all regulated sources to meet the standards everywhere in Falls Lake. Every lake is different. Jordan is different. High Rock's different. All of them are different. The lake, Falls Lake, the water supply is down at the end of that picture that's superimposed on the slide for the city of Raleigh. And at that point in the lake is meeting the standard. It was meeting the standard in 2008 when the lake was put on the 303D list. It continues to meet the standard at the intake. The problem, of course, is that all the arms and all the other parts of the lake, as you well know, you asked the question about where does the flow come from. Unlike Jordan, where you have 90% of the flow coming down the Hall arm and 10% coming down the New Hope arm, 100% of the flow comes down through this, but 70% of the flow to this lake comes in above I-85. It is in the very upper part of the arms. There's very little additional flow that's brought in. So it has its own characteristics. In order to meet the standard everywhere in this lake, you would have to reduce nutrients, we project, from 2018, 50% reduction in nitrogen for every source, not just point sources, not just development, but from forest land, from everything else. And that's on top of what we have seen is about a 25% reduction in nutrients and nitrogen since 2006. So it creates an impossible situation. And so in writing rules to replace that, we have to build in the reality of what the modeling and the science is telling us, because nutrient management in this watershed is needed. We need to continue to manage nutrients in these watersheds. We need to continue to reduce nutrients where possible. We need to make sure that new development puts in nutrient control requirements. The good news is this lake is meeting its intended uses. Water supply, recreation, swimming, all of the uses that this lake normally would have, and it was filled in 1982, by the way, are being met. So it's a situation where we need to maintain that. We need to keep that in place. Management is necessary. And so our modeling says that, and it really, the word that was used earlier is it informs the process. It informs modeling, informs the regulatory process. Modeling is not an end of itself. I ran the modeling program for North Carolina from 1979 through 1985 and had been a modeler. I don't possess the knowledge that Pam has and the other modelers, but I know people who do. And so that's what we have worked through, and that's what we have come up with our 10-year study that we did on the lake and the investment that we made to do that. So on November 12th, we presented the informational item. We went over where the modeling process was. We went through what we had done up to this point, the investment we'd made, the measurements that we had. I'm glad that the legislation was mentioned that created the collaboratory in 2016. That was the legislation that set in place the requirement to readopt the rules, first for the Jordan and second for Falls, and to go through the study process. And so all of the information that was developed by the collaboratory for Jordan, the staff and the state have been looking at all the information that was developed for Falls. We've been looking at along with the staff. So that was the trigger for getting these rules adopted. Once that work was completed, which would, for the Falls was at the end of 2023, then it was supposed to be the trigger for readopting these rules. So that's the process we've been moving forward with. And so we have been providing information to the staff on a continuous basis. They've been involved with all of our meetings. We have had workshops. We have had training sessions on the model. That report that I gave you has like several pages showing all the steps that we have gone through. So we're very we're very confident in our modeling, and DWR has approved that under the rules and says we followed the QA/QC requirements for that. The problem is the modeling doesn't give us the answer that says, hey, if you do this, everything will be okay. We'll meet the standard. So in order for us to develop good governance and good regulatory programs, we have to recommend something that will work and that people can meet. I heard the comments of Commissioner Baumgarten. He said we need to have a model we can meet. We need to have, and that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, in Falls, there is no technological way in which to achieve the reductions necessary to meet the water quality standard. The water quality standard, as applied in this lake, is not appropriate, but it is the standard that we have. And so we are continuing to move through for the readoption of the rules and using the best information that we have and the meeting with the staff. We have had meetings in December. We have meetings scheduled next week with Richard and the department to talk about the point source rule. We have gone through two of the rules, the new development rule and the existing development rule. We have the scope and purpose rule, and then we have the point source rule, and those will be met on. And we hope to be able to reach some conclusion with the staff on something we can bring for the commission to consider. And we're making great progress, and we think that that's what we're going to be able to accomplish. Our modeling, our science, the collaboratory science has led us to the provisions that we have drafted into the rules. John Heisman is going to come up and go over the schedule, but we've been meeting with John and going over the draft rules, and Karen, the planning chief, and we've made great progress on that first two set of rules. We have two more rules to go through, and once we've had our meeting next Tuesday with Richard and the deputy secretary and the other staff, we hope we'll be ready to come up with a proposal that we can take back to the commission for your consideration. So John is going to go over and discuss the schedule. Here is a list of the reference documents that we have. And again, as I said, looking at 10 or 15 minutes, it's not really possible to go through that, but we're more than prepared to come back and do a detailed look at the modeling, if that's something the commission and the committee would like to do. And we can go through and show the calibration curves. We can provide an analysis of how the model meets the data. One of the questions that came up, good question, is how do you correlate the model results to the actual monitoring data? And the big issue with these models is these models will tell you what the concentration is every second. That's the way they're set up. They'll calculate it as if they could predict it every second. When you collect a sample, you go out in a point in time and you take that sample. You got one sample. So when you're calibrating to a point, you're taking a model that generates thousands and momentary, every 6 hours, every hour, a concentration, and then you're comparing it to a sample that was taken on that day at a particular time for a parameter like chlorophyll A. It is a challenge to do that. But as you saw from Pam's curves, when you put the curve of the model up there and you put the actual data, the model doesn't follow exactly the data. It goes through the data, but it doesn't hit every point. And that's the reason that you have professional modelers who have tremendous experience in calibrating models so they can make those kind of professional judgments to do that. But I applaud the commission for taking a great interest in the modeling. I was, as Pam alluded to, I was on the commission when the Falls Lake model was approved back in 2008. I should have asked better questions. And you guys are asking great questions about that. But I think the process of having a model and a nutrient response model is an essential regulatory tool, but you also have to put reason, you have to put judgment, and you have to put in knowledge and experience in order to make decisions about how to move forward. And that's what we're doing through the rules development process.
Thank you, Forrest. Any questions or comment? Commissioner Baumgartner.
I think, Mr. Forrest, appreciate it. Your last statement there is one that I think is very well said. I'm trying to put something together with what you said between the lake is meeting its designated uses, the targets are unachievable. Are we chasing our tail on targets that, are we trying to meet a water quality target because the model said so, even though we're getting good results regardless? I'm trying to put those two together. They're not meeting in my head.
Well, I mean, it was mentioned earlier when we were talking about how did we ever end up where we are? How did we end up with rules on the lower Neuse and for Jordan and for the 303D process is the comparison of the water quality data to the standard. You don't meet the standard, you either develop a total maximum daily load or you develop a water quality management strategy. In Jordan, it was a TMDL. In Falls, it was the Falls rules and the water quality management plan strategy for doing that. And so that's the way that normally works. And in the vast majority of situations, you have a standard that you can work against and achieve. The chlorophyll A standard is not a good standard for a lot of things. I was here when it was adopted in 1979. It was a standard. We were working on the Chowan River, and we set it up to try to address the eutrophication problems in the Chowan River, which were severe. We lost a fishery on that estuary, and so that was the effort. But the 40 micrograms per liter of chlorophyll A, there's no magic to it in the sense, it's not like a toxicant. It's not like anything else. If you're 41 or if you're at 39, there's really no difference. In fact, if you're 45 or 35, it's no different. So the standard isn't well connected to designated uses. You can have impairments of designated uses at chlorophylls less than 40. And you can have perfectly acceptable water quality at greater than 40. So that's the kind of difficulty that there is. We have included in our draft a provision to work with the state to come up with a better chlorophyll A standard for Falls Lake as part of the implementation of the rules.
Follow up.
Did you model designated uses and at what threshold it will not meet designated use?
No, designated uses, as you might imagine, is kind of difficult to do because how do you, recreational, aesthetics, ecological, there is no good measurement of lake ecology. In wadable streams, you use macroinvertebrates, benthic macroinvertebrates, and you can do a pretty good idea of is it meeting uses or not. ecological usage. In lakes, there isn't one. There's no great correlation between chlorophyll A and ecological integrity. Excessive algae, chlorophyll A, can produce unacceptable ecological conditions. But elevated chlorophyll A doesn't necessarily result in that. It can do that. And so designated use determination is a real challenge. We looked at states around the United States. Not many states have a chlorophyll A standard. Most of them have a chlorophyll A. The ones that do have a chlorophyll A standard, they have a level that they look at. If you exceed that level and you're impairing uses, then they put it on the 303D list. If you're exceeding that level, but you're not causing fish impairment, toxic algae, problems at the wastewater plant or at the water treatment plant, if you're not doing those things, then they don't place it on the list. They use a combination of chlorophyll A and the actual use impairment that was there. And we think that's a good consideration for the future in looking at that.
Okay. Mr. Ellison, wait 1 second. I want to follow up on yours. Do you want Commissioner Bumgarner to have that in some format or some narrative as they move forward to be more definitive in what his answer was with your question about usage? Do you want that part of something moving forward as in discussion that you can have in your toolbox?
I think some of that's going to fall out as we go through the rulemaking, but I guess my biggest question, are we chasing our tail in the wrong direction? And it sounds like in some ways we may be.
I'll also give you, we'll pass on the reference. It's in this list of references, but we did a summary report of all of our monitoring in 2019, and there's a whole chapter on use support. It talks about, what are the use support? We went to the Wildlife Resources Commission. We looked at groups on the lake that fish, because some of these things are not directly measurable. You can't say this number says it's fishable or this number's not, but you have tournaments on there. You have fishing groups that do different things. You have complaints. City of Wake County runs a swimming beach on the lake, and sometimes they have to close down because the bacteria gets too high, but that's caused by birds and it's caused by other things, not by algae. There's no real we found very little or no evidence of algal blooms that resulted in fish kills or nuisance conditions that were unacceptable. We just did not find any evidence of that.
I found the narrative on the model of the all forest scenario.
Yes.
Very interesting. If everything was forested, you still couldn't meet the standard.
Still
In a
couldn't
lot of
meet the
areas.
standard.
Yeah, and that was very interesting.
Commissioner Ellison?
And follow up on that, that was documented decades ago when the Chesapeake Bay was when the nutrient pollution became a big deal. The single biggest contributor of nitrogen was forest export. Just to clarify a couple things, you said that the standard came in 1979, and that came straight from DEQ or DENR at the time?
It came from this agency. The gentleman that I worked with, it was an EPA employee, formed a committee, which included people from UNC and NC State, and they had 2 meetings, and they recommended 40. And that was what was promulgated then the next year by the Environmental Management Commission. We had a hearing in Edenton for the chlorophyll A standard, and the 40 was adopted. It's gone through some adjustments, but remember that the standard itself is not the only determining factor. The 303D methodology is what determines whether you meet it or not. It's what triggers whether you go into this regulatory thing where you put in requirements, a TMDL, or you put in a water quality management plan. So the standard may be 40, but as applied now, and Pam's group does that, they do the calculations based on percentage exceedance, and they come up with a number. So the 40 is the number, but the determination is through the methodology for 303D.
Okay, and your model suggests that there's basically nothing you can do to make that standard. Is that correct?
Not the way it's currently determined.
Understood.
If it was on like a seasonal average, I mean, we've been looking at things. We've been studying this standard also along this 10-year period, and we've had researchers that actually worked on the Scientific Advisory Council for the criteria development, Nathan Hall and Marty Lebo, we've been asking them to look at it, and we continue to look at it, because a standard is more than just a number. It's how that number is applied and looked at. So I'm not sure that 40 is a bad number to start with, but how do you frame that? So I think it's going to be important to look at a site-specific standard for Falls Lake that reflects the conditions and the situation in Falls Lake. As you've seen with the Jordan, where you've got a dichotomy on Hall and New Hope, no reservoir in North Carolina functions the same, from High Rock to any of the other ones on the Yadkin. So yes, we need to look at the standard, and we need to evaluate how we can apply it better to continue making progress on reducing nutrients and not placing people in an unsustainable economic, situation. Because if you try to apply 50% reduction to all sources in this watershed, you can't do anything. No more growth.
Understood. And you're working toward proposing language to that end?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, because I think that's what we need. And for Jordan also, Jordan, before it was built, the original EIS predicted this condition.
Yep.
And that was decades and thousands of acres of intense land development ago. So,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Chairman
Just want
Solomon,
to
I'm
make sure
sorry.
you're not
Mr.
planning on doing that in this set of rules.
No, what I was saying, we're putting language in the rules, and we haven't worked through this section of the rules yet, so we got to do on that. But to work together conjunctively over the next 5 years after the rules are adopted to come up with a water quality standard to bring back to the commission for Falls Lake. We're not ready to do that now as part of these rules, and we do need to get these rules readopted. The legislation that created the collaboratory said it was supposed to be done. We're trying to respond to that, and I know that the division is as well. So we're not going to put a new standard in the rules. We're going to put a requirement to develop that.
We're good.
Yes,
Yep.
Cleared it up. Good. Any other questions, comments? If not, we're going to move on. Thank
you.
Good presentation. Thank you, Forrest. John Heisman with the Department, DWR.
Thanks.
John, do you have a time on your presentation, you think?
I have one slide, and I will be very brief.
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything, though. That could be a big slide.
I will be, again, I'm John Heisman with the Division of Water Resources, the Non-Point Source Planning Branch. I just wanted to spend a minute just to kind of wrap this up by just kind of showing the next steps and the process going forward with this timeline that I've put up here. This basically shows us what our next milestones will be over the next 18 months with the Falls rules readoption. This timeline is consistent with past timelines that we've spoken to you about and presented, and consistent with the timeline that was approved by the RRC in terms of the rules readoption packages. And just to kind of orient you, like going left to right, right now we're in that January, February timeframe where we're still continuing to draft the rule package. As Mr. Westall explained, we're working on draft rules. We're engaging with the UNRBA and stakeholders, holding leadership meetings, continuing to work through those issues. I'm planning to hold a follow-up virtual stakeholder meeting. We had a virtual stakeholder meeting this past summer in June where it was held online. Just to kind of, that previous stakeholder meeting was just like a high-level concepts discussion. We're hoping to hold one at the end of February, potentially into early March, because by that point, we hope to have some more draft rule language fleshed out. And just to kind of build on, the UNRBA has done a great job of doing stakeholder outreach. We want to build on that outreach, including the UNRBA and other stakeholders, and go through a virtual presentation of our draft rules. And the idea is us coming back to this group, this body, in March of 2026 as an information item with draft rules and any background information that you need, along with be able to report out from that virtual stakeholder meeting about any concerns that were raised. The idea being that we can refine the rules after March and come back in May for approval of the draft rules and the regulatory impact analysis, get your approval to go to the July EMC for their approval to then take the RAA and the draft rules out for that formal 60-day public comment period during that time frame of August, September of 2026, and hold public hearings on those draft rules. Then we'll engage with the hearing officers that you set, deliberate those public comments, make revisions to the rules based on those public comments. Or you never know exactly how long that process will take, depending on how many comments you receive with that November to March timeframe. And then ultimately shooting to come back to the May 2027 EMC for final approval of the rules before moving on to the RRC. So I just wanted to close with that, just kind of show you our trajectory and our plans moving forward, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions for John? Commissioner Baumgartner?
I think that is a very aggressive schedule you have there, Mr. Howard. Since you're talking about bringing rule drafts back in March, differences between the falls, I know you're working on falls, but the Jordan, that's the rules as written now and what the draft rules are, what has worked well and what is not. I'd love to hear a little bit from the department standpoint of some of the trick points, things that we need to see different, things that you think we need to see different. Has there been any focus on modeling offsets and how you get to that and what that means for each one of those lakes? And, or any BMPs that have been associated with that to get to those. And I would like to see some discussion on 0273 for the Jordan, 0282 for the falls, which are the offset rules, which you've got two divisions in this department that can't even comply with it. So I would like to see, where that's heading and how that can be rewritten to help meet the offsets program.
Sure.
Keying into those things. Just
Sure.
heads up.
You made that note, or are you going to respond?
I did make notes about, we'll be prepared to talk to that more in March. And there has been a lot of discussion about nutrient offsets in this watershed, how things worked under the existing trading rule for falls, whether we can just kind of, repeal that rule and fold in the offset requirements into the existing offset rule. And we'll be able to talk through all that when we come back in March.
Just give me a heads up.
Sure.
Any other
Need to enter a meeting
comments,
before that.
questions? I don't have any, John.
Okay.
I do want to make some comments to the committee.
Okay.
But you're good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to close up. And so let's, I would like to finish up with these two presentations on my part, and then we'll go around and finish this up. But I want to get some council thought as well through this to the committee members. What I have heard and understand and trying to assimilate what I've listened to and learned and watched is that I've heard there needs to be a meeting. I've heard that we've got a schedule. And I've heard that there's a lot of still uncertainties. Maybe it's drawing in closer, but there's still uncertainties about how this is going to work out. There's one left or two left, but they're working on it. They being who we just saw, the presenters, the department, the UNRBA, stakeholders. But what I'm hearing is that they're still moving forward to an end date. My concern as chairman is that these pieces of emails that are being sent to me at my DEQ address me. And I don't want that because I'm not responding in these emails. Not without you committee members knowing exactly what's being sent to me. I will say receive, thank you. But I'm not going to give my opinion without this committee because that's what this committee's for. And that's why I wanted this all to collaborate today to get here so the department and the stakeholders that I've heard by sitting in and listening. We've heard that there's a legal team involved. I don't want to get sued. And this committee, I'm protecting the committee by staying transparent and steady. So as we navigate this forward in the next 3 months, like Commissioner Baumgartner, yes, this is an aggressive schedule. And yes, we've been working on a long time. And there are many, many, many stakeholders in many areas of North Carolina, citizens, and those who are going to be affected by this rule. And my comment to the committee is this year moving forward, I feel at times we've been force-fed at times through different entities with 1,4 and PFAS, because it gets out of the committee and the committee members start tapping on to the EMC commissioners. To me, that's wrong. And that's not what I want in this committee. I want this committee to work it out. I want to be transparent. And what I receive, I want to pass it on to the committee members. But to have committee members, it's not politic. It's about people. To have them send these emails out to the whole commission, then the whole commission gets confused. That's what we do. We navigate boats in a fog. We look out for indicators, and those indicators are markers. And when those markers get moved around, you get in trouble. And that's what the committee members may want to do, is move this over to a commissioner and say, this is what they're working on. And that puts these stakeholders at a disadvantage, and it puts me at a disadvantage, and it puts more importantly, it puts the committee at a disadvantage. So this year, as we move forward, not just with this one, but let's move forward with the others working as a committee, all of us. So I'll get off my stand on that, but I want to move over to council to make sure that this is appropriate, that if we start receiving pieces, that if I do, and it's copied to the chair of the MC, that how do I move that information to the committee members and it be right, that we do it right.
You can forward the information onto the committee without any violation of the open.
And then we can discuss within that email. Can we discuss, or would we be out of order if we're not in compliance with the open meeting law and having a quorum on an email and yet asking for votes or support? How does that work?
I would suggest you not get into a substantive discussion on email.
Okay. Just for the record, thank you. That are my comments, in closing comments. So Commissioner Twitty, I'll start and we'll move around. Commissioner Baumgartner? Okay. Commissioner Ellis?
Just to clarify, your members of the committee are emailing non-committee members of the commission?
They're EMC commissioners, but they're not they're not a water quality committee. They're outside of that.
So outside the committee, commissioners outside the committee are emailing committee members?
No.
Which way is the correspondence?
The EMC committee, the water quality committee, if we have anything coming to us, is it appropriate, question, to send that information to lobby EMC commissioners?
Okay.
Before we have the due diligence taken care of within the committee to get that information back through a process to the public as a process for rulemaking to the public, so it can be vetted by the public, by everyone, all stakeholders, all citizens, and be brought back to the EMC through hearing officers. I don't want that to happen as we move forward, that we become lobbyists to EMC members. And my question, is that legal to do that?
You can disperse information to the committee and the full commission. A substantive discussion beyond that should take place in an open meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate all the work. Any other committee members? Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.